Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube. With the voice, Milt Thompson. Delivering the best of sports programming. Interviews with top celebrities. And the answer to the question, where are they now? And now, Milt Thompson, Playing for Keeps.
Good evening and welcome to Playing for Keeps. I am your host, The Voice, Milt Thompson. I want to thank you for watching out there, folks, and come on back next Friday night. Just like every Friday night, we're having fantastic shows. We're getting unbelievable reviews from you. We're getting some response from the Billboard program there, so I'm not responsible if you run off of the road. Nope, I'm not paying your legal fees. I'm not paying any kind of fees for you doing that. But sometimes my mug might get in your way. But we're so happy that you have responded in such a positive way. Keep on continuing to watch, but more importantly, write us some letters, send us an email, drop us a text message, drop by and say hello, because we really appreciate your patronage of our great sponsors and Jiffy Lube and Blicky Dillon Crandall and East Spot Spas and soon to be some other partners coming along, and we're going to make sure that you do that because we're officially on the books. And we have an official soul today with the official one, who's going to be our special guest today. And we're going to talk to him about some of the things about his world of professional refereeing. I know you guys you find yourself as amateur referees, and you think that you know how to call games, and but you know it's really tough when you play with the big boys. We've had some of our big boys on here, as you well know. We've had like the Gary Brackett's and the Ray Tolberts and the Devon McDonald's and the Dean Biasucci's, guys out there where they're always scratching and clawing against one another. But it's really strange when you got to scratch and claw with someone you think is a zebra. And he's calling the game sometimes maybe for you, but more likely you feel like it's against you. But you know what? We have the official one to talk about that, plus his emergence and some other stuff about giving back to his community and some of the professional organizations with which he is involved. And we're going to talk to the official one, Mark Baltz, right after we come back here on Playing for Keeps.
Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube. Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube.
Welcome back to Playing for Keeps. I am your host, The Voice, Milt Thompson. Again, thank you for watching. Keep on doing so, because we talk with the venerable ones. We talk with the gregarious ones. We talk with the cerebral ones. This week we're talking to the official one. The official one, Mark Baltz. Mark, welcome to our show.
Man, it's great to see you, and it's great to be here. It's been a long time.
Long time, but we go way back, so long-timers.
Yes, we do.
We have a little history. I think there were a couple of other shows that in different parts of your career that we had you on and talked about things, about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between.
All the good stuff. We crossed paths probably originally about 30 years ago.
That's probably exactly right. Yeah. So, Mark Baltz, people have heard you, they've seen you, they've written about you, they've cussed at you. They've done almost everything you can possibly do. But tell us about the emergence to become a big-time official. There are those that work at the IHSAA level, which we think is great, and we think they're folks that are learning and cutting their teeth at the college level. But when you get called up to the big boys, there's a little different level of scrutiny. So tell us about your emergence and your beginnings and how you got there.
Well, it's a process, Milt, and I started right out of high school. My high school athletic director and one of my coaches was a high school official in Central Ohio where I grew up. And he'd seen me officiating intramural games and things in PE class, in high school, and said, "Hey, you got a knack for this." He says, I've been watching you. He says, "Do you think you'd like to become an official?" And I looked at him like, you got to be kidding me, because I'd seen the way he treated officials, all the games as he coached in high school and everything, and I didn't want to be yelled at, and he was a tobacco chewer and spit on a lot of umpires, and I didn't want any part of that. But then he told me, "You're going to school at Ohio University, and that's Party School USA." He says, "It's great beer money, if nothing else, so give it a try." So I thought, well, what the heck, I got nothing to lose. And he got me enrolled in a sports officiating class down there, which he took when he was in school there. And I took the class, got my license in Ohio in football and basketball, and the rest is history. He got me started at the high school level, so I didn't have to start down with the youngsters and work your way up, which I think is the proper way to do it even today, although a lot of people don't do it. There's a huge shortage of sports officials out there in this current time that we're in, and we're doing a lot to change that. But anyhow, I got started in Ohio, worked 4 or 5 years of high school football and basketball, and then I was involved out of school, got my first job in corporate America, and the company I was with was a hometown company there in Central Ohio, and they sent me to my first territory in Fort Wayne back in 1971. Well, I crossed a state line from where football is king and come into a state where basketball is king, and when I got to Fort Wayne, I found out how much basketball really was a king, because I'd already been refereeing high school basketball for 5 years in Ohio and just wanted to make the transition real smooth. Indiana gave me a license based on my Ohio status, so that all took care of itself. And then went out and tried to find some ball games, and boy, did I get an awakening, because Indiana does it differently than everybody else. The high schools do the hiring, and they're hiring 4, 5, 6, 7 years out in advance because the coaches want to protect their home court advantage and get who they want to officiate the games. And I was told by Mayor Bob Armstrong in Fort Wayne, who was also Snyder High School's athletic director, well, if you want to referee in Indiana, you got to start down here at the lower levels and work your way back up, which I didn't want to do. So I got a little inventive and sent out letters to high schools around northeastern Indiana, and several schools hired me sight unseen, which I really appreciated, and I got off on the right foot. It took a little while, and I refereed high school basketball and football in northeastern Indiana, relocated to the Indianapolis area in 1980, had started to work some small college football, was on the radar in basketball to move up. So you're playing the game, you work in as many games as you can, try to be seen, get an opportunity, and when you get the opportunity, try to make the best of it. And I worked in small college for several years. Then I went up and talked to Herm Rohrig with the Big Ten office in the early 80s, got on their scout list, and in 1984 was selected to work in the Big Ten. Worked there for 5 years, had 5 great years in the Big Ten, a lot of fun, 3 bowl games, and just continue to grow as an official.
Let's back up a minute, Mark, here. You're rattling off a career that most people would not understand and know how to put one dot next to it. Let's back up a minute.
All right.
You're down in Athens, Ohio.
Right.
Down at OU.
Harvard on the Hocking. Harvard on the Hocking.
That's it. Harvard on the Hocking. But venerably known as one of the better sports marketing colleges
Very
that
much
are
so,
out
yeah.
there. So
Sure.
they had their whole emphasis kind of built around that infrastructure. And in fact, we talked a little bit about one of their former students who passed away recently, Cal Burleson, who's on the Indianapolis Indians for
Sure,
a long, long time.
exactly.
We talked about him with Randy Lewandowski, was on our show a few weeks ago. But they say that they gave you a basis for an understanding from an educational point of view.
Right.
I'd never heard of a refereeing school. What's that all about?
Well, that's how referees started back umpteen years ago, 55 years ago. They got their license through a sports officiating class, and then it kind of, spread out from that in later years. But you work through the state associations. The state associations around the country are the ones that license officials, and you just apply to the state. You join a local officials association, you get your license, and
We've got that here.
Yes, we've got that in Indiana.
And we had Paul Nettig on, and he talked about it. And,
Right.
and we had Matt on to talk a little bit about the foundation.
About the foundation,
support.
sure.
And we've also talked a lot about why officiating is so difficult for them to come by now.
Well, I think today, in today's market, it's really tough. The young kids don't want to get into it. It doesn't pay real well at the lower levels when you start out, but it does pay a nice income and that's how they're trying to encourage kids, is to get involved. It's a job, help kids grow and get off the streets and find a worthwhile avocation for them to get involved in.
Right.
But then the sportsmanship and the parents and the coaches that aren't trained how to deal with officials and everything drive them all away. They think, yeah, I'm making good money, but I don't need to take all this crap, so they get out of it. And
So fast forward now, you're coaching small college football, then you get advanced to the Big Ten.
Right.
And so from the Big Ten, what's some experiences there that allowed you to think about
Well,
moving on?
once you get into major college football, the NFL starts looking at officials, and they scout you, they evaluate you, you send them. They ask you if you're interested in applying. There's a ton of great officials that never get an opportunity to work in the NFL because their jobs won't allow it, their professional careers won't allow it. But yet there's other people that can go freely. They're independent contractors. They work for themselves, self-employed. So it becomes a process, and they scout you and evaluate you while you're working at the college level. Then they send you an application, then they go through a 3 or 4 year interview process and psychological evaluation process and all that stuff.
How'd you make it?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
We were talking about that the other day because the first question they asked me was, start at age 4 and tell me about yourself. And I'm like, who cares, you know? Right. But then they said, tell me about your last bad call. And I told them I never made one. And then when I walked out of the door from that interview, I said, I'll never get hired.
I'll never get this job. Well, that's the kind of guy they want to do, right?
Exactly. That's
confidence in your calls.
Exactly what they're looking for.
You're being scrutinized even before you get the job.
Before you even get started. And then I went in under the legendary Jim Tunney. He was my first referee. His last 2 years in the NFL, 30 and 31 years, were my first and second year. And he grew up in Southern California, was an educator, come out of an education background. His father was an official and refereed for the great Jackie Robinson growing up in L.A. And Jim came up through the ranks. And I still remember to this day, the day he called me after the NFL notified me that I was going to be in the league. Jim calls me about 2 weeks later and says, Mark, Jim Tunney here. I'm going to be your first referee in the NFL. He says, I don't care how you got here because I know the NFL does their homework well. He says, my only job is to make sure you stay. Took me under his wing, mentorship, and 25 years later, I had one of the greatest careers that anybody could ever have in sports officiating.
Well, people around here are very proud of you, for one, from me kind of coming back to Indiana and saying, you know, I've been to the top. And I know what it is. But I want to talk a little bit about some of those experiences that you had on the gridiron before we get into our last segment and begin to talk about your newly found position here back in basketball, from basketball to football to small college to big college to the pros and back to amateurs again and being in charge administratively is another one of the ways that you give back so much. So we're going to talk a little bit more with the official one. The official, as in Mark Baltz, our good friend, and we're going to talk more right after these short words right here on Playing for Keeps. I am your host, the voice, Milt Thompson. You come right back now.
Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube. Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube.
Welcome back to Playing for Keeps. I'm your host, the voice, Milt Thompson, right here on WHMB Channel 40 every Friday night at 9 p.m. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching, and keep on watching and keep letting us know what you think about our programming, because we know it's unique, but we also know it's some of the better sports programming that you go. Because we not only talk about the big sports stars and the big sports officials and the big sports heroes and the business people, we talk about what goes on behind the game. We talk about what goes on behind their spirit, what goes on behind in their hearts. We find out what goes on when they're getting mad. We understand what it means to have your temperature rise. You know, sports is one of those galvanizing things that we have, no matter how polarized our society gets. But you know, on a Monday morning after the football game, folks are really talking about that official who blew that call from our team, right? And productivity goes up when your team wins. Productivity, they've discovered, goes down when your team loses. I expect that there's been a few heart attacks and a few strokes along the way, but you know, we're not going to blame that on the officials because they get enough of the blame. Why don't we just blame it on our team that didn't play so darn well that week, huh? And one of those guys that's kind of adjudicating in my world, we call it, you know, practicing law. That's always like, you know, one side against the other, and sometimes we call the judge the official. And you don't go yelling at the judge. No. If you're a lawyer, you get tossed yourself right out of there. So what about behavior in NFL and in your NFL career? Tell us some of the highlights of that. And someone had already written a question for me to ask you, and it was about, did you ever fear of safety? and what you did in those circumstances, if there were, and what were the protocols that the NFL has?
I think there were some instances prior to my going into the NFL in '89 where they had some security issues, but once I got on the scene in '89, I think a lot of those were under control. The FBI in every NFL city had a major presence in what was going on, from stadium security to hotel security and things like that. They monitored us from the time we left our home until we arrived back home. We left normally on Saturday morning for a Sunday game and got home late Sunday night or Monday afternoon if we didn't take a red eye from the West Coast. And the FBI knew where we were at all times. So security really wasn't an issue in the NFL. I felt very safe my 25 years there, but there were times in earlier years where there were some issues and officials were, caught in ruckuses going off the field, and beer bottles and snowballs and ice balls and things like that in some of the more unruly stadiums around the league.
Right.
Your Philadelphias of the world, and people think Oakland's a little crazy, but I tell people all those people dress up like that are just disgruntled lawyers, and going
That's
out
got to be who it was.
entertainment on the weekends, So
That's why they moved to Vegas, so you can gamble, bet them on that, right?
exactly. The gambling was, when I got in the NFL, gambling was totally taboo, and now it basically runs the
They
NFL. So
encourage
sure,
it.
and you got a team in Vegas and everything else. So it's just done a total 180. But no, I never had any fears my years there. I felt very safe.
Well, they look at officials and they say, well, that's a heck of a job, and they kind of isolate on that job. But you guys are a team, and you work in crews.
Yep.
Tell us about the crews and how it is determined what segment of the officiating that you're going to do in a particular game.
Well, I went into the league as a head linesman. I stayed there at that position all 25 years of my career. They scouted me 2/3 of the way through my career to possibly consider me to be a white hat, a referee, crew chief. I refereed 3 years in NFL Europe, which was the development ground for players. It became a development ground for officials as well. My only problem there was I had a fine 3-year stint over there, but none of our referees in the NFL retired. So there was no room for me to move into. So they moved me off the list. They say, we know what you can do. We want to look at some other people. So, and then it was probably 2 or 3 years after I went off the scene as a white hat in NFL Europe that our next referee even retired in the NFL. And by that time, they had a pool of 15 or 20 white hats to pick from, and it became a numbers game. So
you're on the field with some abnormally large and athletic guys in
Yep.
terms of kind of physical requirements for you there. Were you under some sort of protocol that says that we've got to at least be able to stay on the field with these guys?
Well, yeah, we were peacekeepers. We used our mouths and our whistles more than trying to be dumb enough to step in between them and get hit in the face, because they are, some of the biggest, quickest, fastest, strongest human beings in the world. The greatest athletes in the world play football in the NFL, and there's 1,800 of them plus, 55 or 60 of them on each team. And yeah, we try to maintain peace, but we knew when to keep our distance and try to do it vocally. And of course, if they're all coming at you on the sideline, self-preservation
Right.
still is the number one rule of the day. So
Right. Well, what an unbelievable officiating career you had, Mark.
I did.
But that doesn't mean that you just quit when you retire. That means that you give back to organizations that really matter. And you kind of came full circle a little bit. Tell us about your kind of new appointment here recently.
Well, I'll do that, but I was active all the way. I got involved in the local officials association here, was on an officer in the collegiate groups, founded the Indiana Football Officials Association here about 20 years ago to help promote younger officials into the collegiate level. And you mentioned, me getting in there, but I'm real proud of the fact that there's, out of the 120 officials in the NFL right now, I used to be the only one from Indiana. Now there's 7 or 8 from the state of Indiana. Two of them will be in LA this weekend.
So a pioneer all the way.
One is an alternate, and one on the field as an on-field official. So, yeah, I've been giving back my whole life. And after retirement in 2016, I had been involved with the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame because I just fell in love with basketball here in Indiana. And I had a mentor in Jimmy Dimitroff who got me involved with the Hall, and you've worked there as well and know the inner workings of how that works. And I've progressed up through the ladder there, and last July became president of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. And we're doing some great things there. It's located in Newcastle, Indiana. Chris May, as you've alluded to earlier, is our executive director, and I'm beginning a 2-year stint as president. And we work together to oversee the whole operation of what we've got going on there in Newcastle. And we were very fortunate to receive an inheritance here last year from an estate that's a story, all in itself, and you need Chris on sometime to talk about that.
Yes, we'll do that.
We inherited a substantial amount of money from a family that just loved Indiana basketball and donated their entire estate to the Hall. And we've got a pretty aggressive remodeling going on now. We've reached out to my friend Frank Hancock at Sport Graphics,
Yes.
another
guy.
another pillar in Indianapolis.
I think they're trying to get him to sponsor here. I think something like that. Frank ought to do that. I remember when Frank was.
Sure,
But anyways, he's got to do it, right?
Frank needs all the help he can get, right? I told him, hey, we need your expertise over here, and he says, I don't have my stamp on that place yet, but I'd be thrilled to try. I says, we're not looking for a bracket on the side of the JW Marriott, but we got a lot of enhancements we want to do, and his company just does fabulous work.
Sure they do.
We're working there, and but it involves other things besides that, and it's our annual banquet every year, which we induct people into the Basketball Hall of Fame, very deserving people who have been players and coaches, and somehow I was awarded the Indiana Pacers Silver Medal Award for this coming year, and will be inducted myself into the Hall of Fame next month on the south side of Indianapolis, which is kind of unheard of because basketball in Indiana is not about the officials. No sports are about the officials. And for me to be selected to that position, and Jimmy Dimitroff, my mentor, is the only other official inducted into the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame because it is designed for players and coaches, and the Silver Medal Award goes to someone who's been very involved as a contributor. You mentioned earlier in another show, Jim Morris. He was one of the original Silver Medal Award winners back in the 60s, and it's grown from there. And it's been mostly sportscasters and coaches who have made a name for themselves that weren't from Indiana or didn't play in Indiana. And to be honored as an official, because, our avocation is to, not be seen or heard, but to do your job and nobody know you're there, and that doesn't happen very often.
It's pretty humbling. I received some humbling awards recently, and I said, well, why are people talking about that? I don't do that for awards. And they said, well, that's why you're getting them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're doing them to do the good work of being the president of the Basketball Hall of Fame in Indiana, and you're talking about a Hall of Fame. Think of all of the athletes that have come through there. We can sit here and name them and talk about them. It would take us 3 more shows to do.
3? I think it'll be a lot more than
just
that.
to get to the 30s.
There we go. There you go.
Well, I tell you what, it's been unbelievable to have gotten to know you through the years. You have been held in high esteem by
I appreciate that.
not only me, but I think everybody else that knows something about sports and the world of sports business. And we're grateful that you were able to take some time out of your busy schedule to spend a little time with me here on this show. Thank you, Mark.
Well, it's been grateful for me too, and you're to be, rewarded by being on your show. You're a great guy.
Well, thank you. And we're going to come back here next week. Thank you, the official one, Mark Bultz, for being on here this week. We're coming back next week for another version of Playing for Keeps right here on WHMB Channel 40.